Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. In my quest to document all the signature guitars, here is another random obscure one that I bet most of the audience doesn't even realize existed. This is a Paul Landers signature guitar in here. And you're probably like, hey Trogly, who the heck is Paul Landers? Well, he's actually the first German-endorsed Gibson guitarist from a little old band called Rammstein. We'll talk about them here in a minute, but first, let's take a quick look at this cool signature guitar. It's a little bit different, it's a little bit quirky, but I call it the anti-Buckethead. I call this one the anti-Buckethead because, you know, it's like all blacked out. It just has a similar vibe not having any inlays on the fretboard here. Alright, so Paul Landers is the rhythm guitarist of Rammstein, and Gibson reached out to him and said, hey, we would like to do a signature model for you because you're starting to become popular here in the US. So in an interview that I watched when he was talking about his signature guitar, he had an idea of what he wanted it to look like, but he didn't really care about individual specs of it. So like he didn't care what fretboard, what wood, he just wanted it to look like this. And as far as the guitar goes, it's pretty basic. There's no pick guard. We just have a single master volume on this thing, not in our regular locations down here, right here, so you can do all your volume swells and whatnot. And on his, he has his three-way toggle switch just completely disconnected. The neck pickup is simply there just for looks, because he only uses his bridge pickup. So we don't have any binding on the fretboard. However, along the body, we actually have a silver-colored binding. We'll have to take a look at that a little bit more in depth on the workbench. Then as far as the finish goes, it is complete satin. So you can either call it a stripped down Les Paul Standard or a blinged up Les Paul Studio. It kind of depends which way you want to go, because it does have body binding, but it doesn't have the fretboard binding. But I would say this feels closer to like a standard faded of the same era. So now let's talk a little bit about Rammstein. They are a German heavy metal band. And when I say heavy, they're heavy, and they are showmen. They have so much pyrotechnics in their show. They first formed their group in 1994 in Berlin, Germany, and they're still active yet today. I first came across these guys thanks to Guitar Hero 5, that was released in 2009. Their song from 97, Du Hast, hits hard as an early teenager. You've got the chugginess of it, you've got the edginess of it, that is all in German. So I've always wanted to document this guitar because once I found out there's a Rammstein signature guitar, all because of that song, it's like, yes, one day this will be mine. But they've got tons of other songs too if you're into heavy German metal music. The late 2000s through the 2010s era of Gibson was just a whole lot of fun because you also have to remember, this thing was birthed in 2012. It was first introduced at the Winter NAMM show that year, but I don't think it really got released until about midway through 2012, based on what I could find on the Internet Archives. But some other obscure models that you might not have known about around the same time are like the Lou Pallo signature Les Paul, the Sammy Hagar Les Paul, the Billy Morrison Les Paul, or even the Nickelback signature Blackwater. And what you need to realize about this period in time of Gibson history is that is when the whole Gibson government raids happened and Ebony started to not get used. So things like the Buckethead Les Paul, you can look up their old spec sheets and it actually says they have Richlite fretboards, but the bulk majority of them are still Ebony. Those ones were done up in 2011. And if you were to look at Musician's Friend's old listing for this one, it actually said it had an Ebony fretboard, but it's actually Obskure wood. But yeah, that looks significantly different. It's almost like a mahogany that's just a really dark color. So I'll have to condition that fretboard up on the workbench and just see how that actually feels. It looks pretty good. I mean, it's got the wood grain, it's got the almost ebony look, and I'm sure most people would prefer actual wood rather than Richlite because there's still a bunch of racist people against Richlite. So how many of these things did they make? Unfortunately, I've never seen an official number posted anywhere by Gibson. I mean, there might be guesses. Generally in this era, it's between 200 to 400 limited editions. So unfortunately, I don't have an official number to share with you guys, but I will tell you these are very, very rare and they do not surface to the market very often. That's why, even though this one's a little bit beat up, I wanted to document this thing anyways, because I mean, it's German metal music. It should be beat up, right? But I do have the original MSRP price for you guys. It was $3,500, which is kind of expensive for what this was. So besides what we talked about earlier, it's just kind of like a regular Gibson USA case here, so nothing fancy with that. As far as paperwork goes, this one only has an owner's manual and a truss rod tool. I'm sure there would have been a little bit more case candy with it originally. But anyways, to learn more about the Paul Landers signature Les Paul, let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. inside the lander's paw. Let's go ahead and check this out. So, EMGs typically are on a quick connect system, and these ones are no different. You can see the spec sheets were not lying, EMG 60 in the neck, and in the bridge, an EMG 81. However, being EMG pickups, I mean, these readings don't make much sense to me. 17.07 k ohms in the bridge, neck 17.06, middle position for fun 13.28. Honestly, that's the first time I've ever got EMGs to read anything, so I count that as a win. But just in case you're curious how they got away with this nice all chrome look right here, it's because they just put a metal topper over the pickup ring. That's very common for Gibson to do, even yet today. Like if they're doing gold or chrome, you can see that also on like the Lzzy Hale signature models. The mod collection and demo shop like to do that as well. Although I think it would be cool to see an all metal pickup ring, but maybe there's a reason that they don't want to do that. So you can see the EMG branding on them right there, but it pretty much disappears by the end. It's just a nice mirror-like surface. So as far as our bridge and tailpiece go, it's not just regular stuff. He actually has locking Tone Pros hardware. They probably just threw it on here for him because they're supposed to be better, right? There's no branding on the bridge that I could see, but the tailpiece does have the Tone Pros branding. And just in case you don't understand what a locking means, is once you have it on here, you have these Allen screws right here that you just tighten, and then that goes up against the post. So during string changes, this does not fall off, and there's the theory that that sticks to the post better and transfers vibrations to the guitar better, resulting in better tone. The bridge has those same little screws right here that just locks it into place again. So when you're doing string changes, you don't lose your setup, and for the whole, it's a 1-unit thing. A cool premium feature nonetheless. As far as the controls, as we said earlier, just a single volume on this one, no coil splitting or anything like that. It's just straight up volumes. It's here for volume swells, but it's so strange not having anything right here. It kind of gives me Les Paul Goddess vibes because they have that same like semi-gloss glossy top to it, where I think this one's been buffed up a little bit. I mean, you can definitely see in this area where somebody's hand has been rubbing against it that has made it extra glossy, but I'm betting from the factory this kind of had that semi-gloss to it as well. It wasn't complete satin because the sides feel very similar to that, but then we'll see on the back that's more of like a stain, but it is a very thin non-ultra gloss finish, and due to that, any type of impression that gets on the top, you're definitely going to be able to see. So it looks like that might be a seam line showing right here. So it might be a 2 or 3 piece maple top, but you've got a ding right here. And unfortunately, that's a small area where the finish was broken. So that one's like just always visible because of that. You could touch that up, but I'm not going to because generally touch-ups look just as bad. But the other thing is you might be saying, hey, is that orange peel? No, that's the maple wood grain underneath this. So you can actually see all that and obviously all these other dings that are on this example. This one actually cleaned up a lot better than I was expecting it to. I mean, it looks pretty slick from the outside, but now let's take a look at the binding. So at first I thought it was 1-ply, but now that I'm looking at it, you can actually see a very thin black layer here. So what I think they did is they did a 3-ply binding and then they painted it over this like opaque metallic silver, because you can definitely see some sparkles in whatever that is, but it's not like over the top shining in your face or anything. I definitely have never seen another Les Paul have any type of similar binding to this one. So that is certainly a unique feature to the Paul Lander signature. Let's take another look at this because you don't see this all close up every day. The nice thing about being able to see that maple wood grain is like in this area, you can just vaguely make out that this one has like that really wide ringage underneath it. So that's a pretty cool maple top under here. But we've got a mahogany body here with 9-hole weight relief, is the way the spec sheets made it seem. I don't have an x-ray yet to verify that, but hopefully one day I will be able to purchase one. Fun story, I have actually found what I think we need. It's like an airport baggage scanner, but it's like $25,000. And I don't know if I want to spend $25,000 to do it, but hey, if 25,000 people wanted to pitch in $1, that could be fun for the show. But now let's move on to the Obskure fretboard, or however you say it. Gotta say, not a big fan of this. You know what it reminds me of? Glary fretboards. It's not terrible for a budget level guitar, but something this high end, don't like it. Don't like the way it feels. I thought maybe it was just dried out, so I conditioned it, but no, it almost looks like it's just a million layers of wood glued together, and it's very rough feeling. It is not my favorite. I can definitely see why Gibson decided to use Richlight over this because, I'll be honest, despite this being real wood, I would definitely prefer Richlight over this. Or maybe it's not the wood's fault, Gibson just didn't do a good job at finishing it. As far as high craftsmanship quality, this isn't necessarily the era well known for that. The end of the Henry J era was quite interesting though. But that's on a mahogany neck that we can see right here through the truss rod cavity. But we have 22 medium jumbo frets. It's your regular 12-inch radius with 24 3/4 inch scale length. I get a nut width of 1.69 inches. That increases to 2.06 by the 12th with a first fret neck depth of 0.87 and 0.97 by the 12th. It's got a good feel to it, but it's definitely not like R7 baseball bat. It's not really even close. It has more 60s attributes, but yet still just a little bit thicker. So if you've always been scared away from one of these because of the 50s neck, I mean, it doesn't really get super big until right here. Here's what that neck profile looks like at the first fret and the 12th fret. Starts off as a really rounded C shape, and then just gets a little bit wider. It's definitely a fairly chunky neck. He wanted it to be pretty big. Moving on to the face of the headstock, it's also that satin finish, but instead of a yellow Les Paul model silkscreen, it's white, and we do have the Gibson Mother of Pearl logo. Now this one's got some scratches on it because somebody liked to leave the strings long. It looks like maybe some sort of a finish rub or ding right there. But as far as our truss rod cover goes, it's just a plain black one. Moving on to the back side, here you can kind of see what I was talking about earlier, how this is literally just a stain finish. You can still feel all the wood grain. They did not do any grain fill on the back, unlike what they did on the top. So it's like a slightly premium satin finish up there, and then just a full-on stain back here. So very simple in the finishing department. On top of all that, it's black. Now this one, being a super thin finish, any type of nick or ding all of a sudden becomes, hey, you've got wood exposed. But you can see the two-piece mahogany back right here with that center seam and those areas I was talking about. This one was definitely played. I wouldn't say abused though. Now that I've had it in person and I felt the finish and I kind of understand it a bit better, I'm sure most of them are kind of in this condition. And I'm sure this didn't start life feeling as glossy as it does. It was probably a lot more satin-like. But it's hard to judge when guitar has been out for like 10 plus years. So, when I was tearing this thing apart, I was like, how did they get that up there? So this is normally shifted down just a tad. So they shifted this whole back plate up. As far as the way this looks, it's fairly traditional. But this right here is your battery pack, because these are active EMG pickups. I've always found these things incredibly hard to open. I always have to take a screwdriver and ply it in there to even get these things out. Then your battery sleeps in there. Now it looks like a battery might have exploded in here at one point in time and caused some corrosion. The seller of this one didn't say that the guitar didn't work, so I'm hoping that's just fine. It's not that hard to replace those though. You just look up Japan Godo, or just replace that terminal or clean it up. But anyways, that's what that looks like here on the inside. EMG Quick Connect set. You know, if you're trying to learn how to do guitar rewiring and stuff, but you're too scared to solder yet, try an EMG project, because all the newer ones are just quick connects like that. You just slide them onto the prongs, and then you have like a little box. So this is not a hidden tone controller or anything. That's just what EMGs need. But you have all this room. I'm surprised you didn't have them put like a built-in distortion. Like we have built-in wahs with the Joe Perry signature, and you got a built-in flanger on the Sully Erna Les Paul Studio. Maybe they should have had pyrotechnics in this guitar and just burst into flame. But no, we were just left with a big gap back here. I think it would have been cool if they would have did a Les Paul Jr. style route back here, because then it would make it even freakier. I missed a spec I didn't even know about. Look at the edge of this. The output jack is recessed into the side of the guitar. I wonder if he specifically requested that for any particular reason, because normally it just sits on top. But that's recessed kind of like a Neutrik jack like they were doing in this era. Pretty cool that they would do that. I wonder if it has anything to do with like the EMG output jack, if it's any different. This actually came stock with Dunlop strap locks. That's something that he must prefer. And yes, indeed, this appears to have thin binding in the cutaway. If you get it just right, you can see that maple top. Now, moving up the back of the neck, this has definitely been played into more of a gloss. You can see a few impressions back here. But brand new, I'm guessing it would have felt more similar to this. So maybe this is how it left the factory, kind of like this, but then, yeah, I can see how that moved into a gloss. It's like somewhere in between the tops finish and this finish. This is an interesting guitar to feel. So back up here, we have locking Grover tuners on this model, and you might say, hey, what are those two things right there? The only thing that says Paul Landers on here, it can be removed. It says Paul Landers #1. And I was hoping this would have like the heft of a quarter. Like think back to those vintage fathead devices where it's like a solid piece of brass that you put under your tuners because more weight up here is supposed to equal more sustain. But no, when I took this off, it's really light and pretty thin and just secured by those 2 screws. But this one was made in 2012. Our serial number dates it to the 138th day of the year when the neck was stamped. Initial batch 557th in production. So technically this was the 58th guitar stamped. That has nothing to do with this run. That's just out of all the necks they stamped that day, that was this number. So no, you cannot use those to help identify how many they made of these. Looks like we got a couple of dings through the finish up here as well. As far as the blacklight test goes, everything is looking good here. The headstock has a very faint glow to it. The body has a little bit more because it's a more finely polished satin finish. You can definitely see where there's more sweat absorption in certain areas than others. But everything's looking okay here. Back side of the body, everything's looking good here. You can kind of see those dings a bit better and a sweat absorption area in the finish right there. And of course a similar phenomenon on the neck there. A couple of marks, but thankfully no breaks, cracks, or repairs. Our last spec to capture here is the weight. And this one weighs 9 pounds, 10.8 ounces. Wow, almost 10? I mean, it's chunky, but I didn't think it'd be quite that chunky. But anyways, let's go ahead, plug this beast in, and hear how it sounds. Let's go ahead and run through the tones. As you would expect, Mr. Landers Les Paul is just nice, chunky, and heavy. I love that bridge pickup. It's great for just about anything. The neck pickup's extra thick. It's got some good solo tones to it. But of course, this guitar can also do a lot more than just distorted tones. That's just mainly what it's meant for. EMGs can get you really nice, glassy, clean tones depending on your amp. It tends to really overdrive my deluxe reverb though, so I've got this turned down a little bit so it doesn't do that. We're at about 7. So here's our neck position. This guitar's really good with harmonics too, like even the hard spots to get them. So naturally, pinch harmonics are pretty easy too. If you need to get your Lagrange solo on, just get yourself some of these pickups. That's kind of the tones I was getting. Now that we know all about the Paul Lander signature Les Paul model, what are my final thoughts on this thing? A heavy, chuggy chug beast. This was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a little bit different from what I've been reviewing the past couple of days. So, you know, getting to go back to, you know, do Hast and all that, that was just a lot of fun. I've always wanted to play that song on this guitar. I don't care if I'm playing it right or not. That was a lot of fun. But I was actually surprised by this neck pickup and how easy it is to get pinch harmonics off of this thing. So if you want to buy it just for the chugginess, yeah, you can do that. But this neck pickup, despite him not necessarily using it a lot, I definitely was a fan of that. It's a super simple looking Les Paul. It's elegant at the same time though, and has some unique elements and attributes to it that make it different from everything else. So if you like Rammstein, or you like chuggy chug guitars that are very simple, or you're just a weird quirky Les Paul collector guy like I am, I would definitely suggest trying one of these. Now, if you don't really care about the artist premium and everything, yeah, you can get many guitars like this. Just put EMGs in pretty much any Les Paul and you're good to go. because you're going to have to pay a huge premium for one of these things simply because of their rarity. So maybe not worth it to your average Joe, but if you're a collector or you're a big fan of Paul, it's a no-brainer. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed checking this guitar out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.